My name is Martha Greenfield, and I was standing in the checkout line at Walmart holding a mountain of crayons, notebooks, glue sticks, and 3 packs of paper towels. The cart was already full, but I kept checking the list my daughter-in-law texted me, afraid I'd missed something. It wasn't even my list. It never is. The young cashier smiled as she scanned the piles. "You must be a teacher," she said, trying to make small talk. I smiled back, though it felt heavy. "No, honey, just a grandmother who doesn't know how to stop bailing her son out." She looked surprised, maybe even sorry for asking. I wanted to laugh it off, but the truth hung there. She handed me the receipt, long enough to use as wrapping paper, and the total made my chest tighten. $247.63. 4th year in a row, right around the same amount. Every August, I swear it's the last time. And every August, I find myself right back here, pushing a cart full of school supplies that my son and his wife forgot to buy. It started small, like these things always do. The first year, they called in a panic the night before school started. "Mom, the stores are cleaned out," Reginald said. "Could you just grab a few things for the kids? We'll pay you back Friday." I didn't think twice. I remembered being a young parent, juggling bills, doing my best. I went to the store, filled a cart, and felt good about helping. Friday came and went. So did the repayment. But I told myself it wasn't about the money. The second year, it wasn't even a call. It was a text from Belinda. "Hey, Mom, you're good at this stuff. Could you pick up what the kids need again? We're buried with work." I sighed, but said yes. That year, I told myself, it's fine. They're busy. I'm retired. I have the time. By the 3rd year, it was an expectation. The forgetting had turned into a routine. No reminders. No thank you. Just silence until I sent a picture of the bags, neatly packed, in the hallway. And now, here I was again, year 4. As the cashier bagged the last box of tissues, I glanced at the families around me. Young parents with kids tugging on their sleeves, comparing lunch boxes, arguing over colors. I remembered doing the same with Reginald when he was little. How proud I felt when he'd pick a bright red folder and say, "This one will make me smarter, Mom." Back then, we didn't have much, but we always managed. I worked double shifts at the diner to make sure he started every school year with what he needed. We didn't forget. We planned. We cared. I pushed the cart out to the parking lot. The summer sun already dipping low. The heat rose from the pavement, that sticky August kind of heat that makes everything feel heavier. I loaded the bags into the trunk, one by one. Markers, notebooks, sanitizer bottles, shoes. Every bag carried a little resentment. Not at the kids. They're just children, but at the 2 adults who never seem to learn that love isn't measured by what someone else buys for you. My hands shook slightly as I folded the receipt and slipped it into my wallet right next to the 3 others from years past. I don't even know why I kept them. Maybe I thought someday Reginald would ask how much it all added up to. Maybe part of me wanted proof that I tried, proof that I gave. Before closing the trunk, I stopped and looked at the reflection in the rear window. A tired face, kind eyes, maybe too kind. My late husband used to tell me, "Martha, you can't fix grown people." He was right. I just didn't want to believe it. On the drive home, the receipt kept sliding out of the cup holder, brushing my hand like it wanted to remind me it was there. Each bump in the road made the plastic bags rustle behind me. It sounded like whispers, soft and accusing. I turned up the radio, but even the music couldn't drown it out. When I got home, I stacked the bags neatly by the door, so I wouldn't forget to drop them off tomorrow. It was almost funny, me making sure I didn't forget, when the whole reason I was doing this was because they did. I sat down at the kitchen table, pulled out the receipt, and started writing the date on it. My handwriting looked shaky. I realized I was tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. I thought about my pension check, how I'd planned to use this month's leftover money to fix the porch railing, or maybe take a day trip with the church ladies. Instead, it went into markers and glue sticks for children whose parents hadn't even bothered to text a thank you last year. There's something about being a mother that keeps your heart open even when your wallet shouldn't be. But as I looked at that stack of receipts, I felt something shift. It wasn't anger exactly. It was more like a quiet ache that finally turned into clarity. For years. For Augusts. For piles of shopping bags. For times I told myself it was okay. I picked up the phone, thought about calling Reginald to let him know I'd finished the shopping. But I stopped myself. I realized that every time I call first, I make it easier for them not to think about what they're doing. Maybe silence would say more this time. I placed the phone back down and sat there for a moment, watching the sun fade out of the kitchen window. The street was quiet. Somewhere next door, I could hear the faint sound of a boy laughing. Probably Janice's grandson, Devin. He's always out front helping her carry groceries. He's polite. A good kid. The kind you hope does well. I closed my eyes and took a long breath. My back ached. My heart felt heavier than my grocery bags. And the receipt stared up at me like a tiny truth I couldn't unsee. I whispered, to no one in particular, "This can't keep happening." And for the first time, I actually meant it. It all began 5 years ago, though sometimes it feels like yesterday. Reginald had just lost his job at the printing company. I still remember the call, his voice low, defeated. "Mom, they shut down the whole department," he said. "I don't know what I'm going to do." At the time, I was just a few months into my retirement. I'd worked 39 years at the post office, never made a fortune, but I'd managed to save. I told him, "You'll find something else, son. You're smart. You'll land on your feet." He didn't sound so sure, but I meant every word. That first August after his layoff, when school shopping came around, I offered before he could even ask, "Let me get the kids' supplies this year." I told him, "It'll help while you get back on your feet." He hesitated at first, but Belinda was quick to accept. "That would be such a help, Mom," she said. "Just this once, I promise." I believed her. Why wouldn't I? That first year, I felt good about it. I enjoyed picking out things for the kids. I even took them with me. They ran up and down the aisles, laughing, holding up folders with cartoon characters, arguing over who got the sparkly pencil case. I could see how happy they were. It made me feel useful again, needed. When you retire, that feeling can fade quicker than you expect. I paid the bill without a second thought. It was about $180. I remember because I'd written it in my checkbook like I always do. Belinda said they'd pay me back as soon as Reginald found another job. I told her not to worry about it. I was just glad the kids wouldn't have to start school empty-handed. The next year, though, things didn't improve much for them. Reginald picked up part-time work at a warehouse, and Belinda started babysitting. They were managing, but just barely, or so I thought. When August rolled around again, I called to see how everyone was doing. Belinda sounded tired. "Oh, Mom," she said, "we've been so busy trying to catch up on bills that I haven't even looked at the school supply list yet. You're always so organized with these things. Could you maybe handle it again, just until we get back on our feet?" It didn't sound like a big deal. I figured I could help one more time. What's a few $100s when it comes to your grandkids? That year, I didn't take the kids shopping. I went alone. It felt quicker, easier. I dropped everything off in bags at their front door. Belinda thanked me with a quick text and a smiley face. Reginald didn't say much, but I assumed he was embarrassed. I told myself he didn't have to say thank you. I understood. But something about that drop-off didn't sit right. I drove home thinking, it's fine. It's just temporary. By the third year, Reginald had found steady work again, sales job, decent pay. They'd even posted pictures online from a vacation at Myrtle Beach. The kids looked happy, tanned, and healthy. I was glad for them. Then one afternoon in late August, I got a call. Belinda sounded cheerful, almost too cheerful. "Hey, Mom, the kids are starting school next week. We totally forgot to grab their supplies. You know how it is, things get busy. You wouldn't mind helping one more time, would you?" I remember looking down at my checkbook, my pen still in hand from paying the electric bill. I hesitated, but she kept talking before I could answer. "You always find the best deals," she said, "and you know what they need better than anyone." I could have said no. I should have said no. But instead, I said, "I'll see what I can do." It was the same store, same aisles, same feeling in my chest. That year, I spent nearly $230. When I dropped the bags off, Belinda didn't even come out to say hello. She sent one of the kids to grab them from the porch. That night, I sat on my couch, the TV playing some game show I wasn't really watching. I thought about how helping had once felt good, and now it just made me feel invisible. Still, I try to be understanding. Maybe they really were struggling. Maybe it was just poor planning. I gave them the benefit of the doubt, because that's what mothers do. You remember the child before the adult, the one who needed you. It's hard to stop seeing them that way. The fourth year rolled around, and not a word from Reginald or Belinda. No hint that they were shopping, no mention of supplies. A week before school, I called just to check in. Belinda said, "Oh, right, we meant to go this weekend, but we've got so much going on. The kids will be fine. You're always so good at finding everything, if you don't mind." She said it so casually, like it was already decided, like it was my role now. That call left me staring at my phone for a long minute. I realized then that something had shifted. Helping wasn't a favor anymore. It had become my obligation in their minds. I wasn't being asked. I was being assigned. It stung more than I expected. I thought about my own mother, who used to tell me, if people stop saying thank you, it's because they've stopped seeing what you're doing as help. I brushed that thought away then, but it came back sharp that night. After that, I started keeping the receipts. Every one. I tucked them into a folder in my desk, labeled school. It wasn't for revenge or proof. It was just something inside me that needed to keep track, like maybe I could measure where my kindness stopped being kindness and started being something else. Each year blurred into the next. Same store, same lists, same empty thank yous. I kept reminding myself, it's for the kids. But it became harder to ignore the growing feeling that I was just filling a gap their parents had stopped even pretending to care about. One afternoon, I bumped into a neighbor at the grocery store. She smiled at me and said, "Martha, you're such a good grandmother. Those kids are lucky to have you." I smiled back, but deep down, I wondered if being good meant never saying enough was enough. That night, I sat on my porch, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. I thought about how many times I'd promised myself I'd stop, and how easily I broke that promise every year. Helping family had always felt like the right thing to do, but lately it felt less like family and more like a job I never applied for. It was quiet out there, except for the sound of kids laughing down the street. I wondered if my grandkids would even remember who bought their notebooks, or if it would all blend together into one big blur of things that just showed up when they needed them. That's when the truth hit me, clear as day. They weren't asking anymore, they were assuming. Every mother swears, just this once. Then once turns into always. If you've ever carried a grown child longer than you planned, share this story with someone who'd understand. And if you think I should have stopped sooner, write it below. I can take the truth. Once you let something slide enough times, it stops feeling like a favor and starts feeling like routine. That's exactly what happened. What began as one small gesture turned into a pattern I couldn't seem to break. The next few years blended together. Every August looked the same. My phone would buzz with a text from Belinda, usually short and casual, like she was ordering takeout. "Hey, Mom, school's around the corner. You still have that list from last year." Or sometimes, "We totally forgot to get supplies again. You're so good at this. Can you handle it?" No apology. No real conversation. Just expectation wrapped in a few words. I'd sigh, stare at the message for a minute, and then grab my purse. It wasn't even a question anymore. It was automatic. That first morning in the store each year, I'd tell myself this was the last time. But the moment I saw the rows of crayons and folders, I'd soften. I'd think about the kids walking into class without the right things, and my heart would give in before my head could catch up. So I'd fill the cart again: scissors, notebooks, glue, hand sanitizer, tissues, the whole list. I got good at it too. I even memorized what each grandchild's teachers usually ask for. It wasn't the money alone that wore me down. It was the quiet frustration of knowing I was being taken for granted. I was living on a pension, not a paycheck. Every August, my budget shrank, and I'd tell myself I'd make up for it later. But later never really came. I didn't tell anyone how much it cost me. I didn't want pity. I just adjusted my own spending. No new shoes that year, skipped lunch with my church friends, stretched my groceries a little thinner. Meanwhile, the kids would come over with big smiles, showing off their new backpacks and saying, "Grandma, look what Mom and Dad got us." I'd smile and nod, pretending it didn't sting. They didn't know any better. They were proud and happy, and I wasn't about to ruin that. But it's strange how something that once brought joy starts to leave a small ache. Each time they left, my house would feel emptier, like a reminder of all the quiet ways I'd been taken for granted. One August afternoon, I was unloading the car when my neighbor Janice came walking over. She's about my age, works part-time at the grocery store. Kind woman, always asking about my grandkids. She saw me struggling with the bags and laughed softly. "Martha, are you stocking a classroom, or what?" "Feels like it," I said, setting down a bag of notebooks on the porch. She looked at the pile and shook her head. "You're such a good grandma. Those kids are lucky to have you." I smiled, but before I could thank her, she sighed and said something that stuck with me. "My poor Devin would give anything for those supplies. He's top of his class, you know? But his parents are barely keeping the lights on. They both work nights now. I don't know how he stays so positive." I didn't know what to say. Devin was always polite, always helping her carry groceries. I'd seen him mowing lawns around the neighborhood for extra cash. I just nodded. "He's a good boy," I said. Janice smiled. "He really is. Some kids just don't take anything for granted." That line stayed in my head long after she went back inside. Later that evening, I sat at the kitchen table, sorting through receipts again. I did the math. For years, for back-to-school seasons, roughly the same total each time. It came to almost $1,000. I tried not to think about it in those terms, but it was hard to ignore. I thought about Devin working, studying, helping his grandmother, while my own son and daughter-in-law went on trips and posted photos of new furniture online. The difference between them wasn't money, it was appreciation. The next week, when I brought the bags to Reginald's house, Belinda barely looked up from her phone. "Just leave them by the door? Mom, I'll go through them later." "Where are the kids?" I asked. "They're with friends." She said, "We've got a lot going on this week." She didn't even make eye contact. On the way home, I felt this sharp mix of anger and sadness. Not because of the money, but because of how easy it had become for them to ignore me. They treated my help like it was part of their household routine, not an act of love. It reminded me of something my late husband used to say: When people stop being thankful, that's when you know they've stopped seeing you. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Janice's words about her grandson. Some kids don't take anything for granted. It got me thinking about the kind of example I was setting, not for my son, but for my grandkids. What was I teaching them if they grew up thinking things just appeared free and easy? The following year, when the familiar text came through, "Hey, Mom, any chance you can grab the school stuff again?" I hesitated before answering. My finger hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to say, "You're adults. Handle it." But instead, I typed, "Sure." I don't even know why. Habit, maybe, or guilt, or that old ache that comes from wanting to make sure the kids are okay, no matter how old their parents get. When I pulled into my driveway with the latest round of supplies, Janice waved from her porch. "Back to school already?" she asked. "Seems like it never ends." I said. She smiled sadly. "I wish I could help Devin the way you help yours." That made something twist inside me. I wanted to tell her that helping isn't always what it looks like, that sometimes it's the hardest thing in the world to say no. But I didn't. I just nodded. Later that night, I watched the local news while folding the receipt in half. They were running a story about a local scholarship drive for underprivileged kids. I thought about Devin again, about how he never complained, how he kept trying no matter what. It hit me then how unfair it all seemed. Some people give everything and still struggle. Others have help handed to them and don't even notice. I looked at the neat stack of receipts on my table, the total creeping higher every year, and I felt something inside me shift. I wasn't sure what it meant yet, but I knew I was done pretending it didn't bother me. Some kids know the value of what they're given. Some never have to learn. Some kids never have to learn the value of what they're given. Others learn it the hard way. Which side do you think the world rewards? And share if you believe gratitude still matters. August crept up again before I knew it. The stores had their back-to-school banners out, and every commercial on TV was about sales on pencils and backpacks. You'd think after all these years I'd feel that old itch to go shopping, but this time I didn't. I just felt tired. One afternoon, I picked up the phone and called Reginald. I wanted to give him a fair chance. No surprises, no excuses. "Hey son," I said, "you've got a week before school starts. Did you and Belinda pick up what the kids need?" He hesitated for half a second before answering, "Not yet, Mom. We were going to go this weekend. Don't worry about it." I wanted to believe him. "All right," I said, "just make sure they have what's on their list. You know how teachers are. First day means full supplies." He chuckled. Yeah, we got it. You don't need to stress." 2 days later, I was scrolling through my phone when a photo popped up on social media. Belinda had posted it. There they were, smiling in front of a cabin at Hocking Hills, matching t-shirts and all. The caption read, "Last summer getaway before school starts." I stared at the picture for a long minute. I wasn't angry about the trip itself. Families need breaks. But I couldn't help thinking about how many tight months they'd mentioned over the years. Somehow there was always money for vacations, takeout, and new phones, just never for their kids' school supplies. That evening, I set my phone face down on the table and made a decision. This year, I wasn't going to step in. I wanted to see what would happen if I didn't do anything. The days went by quietly. I busied myself with small things, watering the flowers, organizing old photo albums, reading on the porch. But every time I passed a store, my stomach twisted. I'd see parents with carts full of crayons and backpacks, and I'd feel that old pull in my chest. I'd tell myself, "Don't do it, Martha. They're grown. They'll handle it." Still, part of me worried. What if the kids showed up empty-handed? What if they got embarrassed in class? Those thoughts kept me up at night. I kept fighting with myself. One half saying, "Stay out of it," the other whispering, You can't let the children suffer. The night before school started, I made a cup of tea and sat by the window. The house was still, the kind of quiet that hums. I tried to distract myself with a crossword puzzle, but my eyes kept drifting to the clock. It was almost 8 when the phone rang. I knew that ringtone. My granddaughter, Lily. I smiled automatically, but her voice on the other end stopped me cold. "Grandma," she said, sniffling. "We don't have anything." My heart sank. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "Mom said the stores were out of the good stuff. We don't have notebooks or crayons or anything for tomorrow." I could hear her little brother in the background asking, "Do we have to share pencils again?" That did it. I felt something deep inside me crack, like a rubber band that had been stretched too long. I wanted to be calm, but my voice came out sharper than I meant. "Put your dad on the phone." There was a pause, then muffled sounds before Reginald's voice came through, tired and defensive. "Mom, it's late. We were going to handle it." "Handle it," I said quietly. "Your daughter just told me she has nothing for school tomorrow." He sighed. "Belinda had to work late. We'll grab what we can in the morning." "Tomorrow," I repeated. "Reginald, you've had weeks." "I know, Mom. It's been hectic." That word, hectic, nearly made me laugh. Life is always hectic. It was hectic when I worked 2 jobs. It was hectic when I raised him alone after his father passed. But I still made sure he had what he needed. I didn't say all that, though. I just sat there holding the phone, feeling the kind of disappointment that's heavier than anger. Finally, I said, "I'll bring over what I have here. They can use that for now." He didn't argue. He just said, "Thanks, Mom," like it was a given. When I hung up, I sat there for a moment, staring at the wall. My tea had gone cold. I went to the hallway closet, where I keep spare supplies, leftovers from previous years. There were half-used notebooks, extra pencils, a few unopened boxes of crayons. Enough to get them through the first week. Maybe. As I packed the items into a paper bag, I caught myself shaking my head. The whole thing felt familiar, but this time it hit differently. I wasn't frustrated about the money. I was heartbroken about what it said about them. I drove over just after 9. Their house lights were still on. Belinda opened the door, phone in hand, expression flat. "Oh, Mom, you didn't have to do that," she said. I handed her the bag. "I didn't, but the kids shouldn't go to school unprepared." She took the bag without meeting my eyes. "Thanks. We were going to get it done tonight." Behind her, I could see Lily sitting on the couch, hugging her backpack like it was empty hope. My grandson was lining up toy cars on the floor. They both looked up at me with small, tired smiles. "Good night, babies," I said softly. "Do your best tomorrow." They nodded. I left before Belinda could say anything else. Driving home, the roads were empty. The streetlights flickered past like slow blinks. I felt a strange calm. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that comes after you finally hit your limit. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a minute with my hands still on the steering wheel. I thought about that phone call, about Lily's little voice saying, "We don't have anything." It echoed in my head like a bell you can't unring. That sound, the fear and embarrassment in her voice, broke something in me that night. I realized I couldn't keep pretending that my help was fixing anything. It was only making them lazier, more comfortable in their excuses. I'd been protecting my grandkids from feeling disappointment, but maybe the lesson they really needed was for their parents to step up. As I turned off the car and gathered my things, I whispered to myself, "No more." I wasn't sure what that meant yet, but deep down I knew something was about to change. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I hadn't slept much anyway. My mind kept replaying that phone call from Lily, her small voice trembling. I couldn't shake it. I made myself a cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the folder I kept in the drawer, the one labeled school. Inside were all the receipts from the last 4 years. Every total was circled, neat and careful. I added them up with a pen, one by one. When I got to the final number, I leaned back and exhaled. Almost $1,200. $1,200 from a pension that wasn't meant to stretch this far. And what did it buy? It bought their excuses, their carelessness, their comfort. By 7:30, I decided I wasn't going to let this go another year. I grabbed the old paper bag from last night, the one with the leftover pencils and folders, and headed for Reginald's house. When I pulled up, their car was still in the driveway. The curtains were drawn. It was the morning of the first day of school, but nothing about that house looked like a family getting ready. I knocked on the door. Belinda opened it, wearing a robe, her hair up, holding a mug of coffee like she hadn't a care in the world. "Mom, it's early," she said with that practiced smile of hers. "We were just getting started." I walked in without waiting for an invitation. The kitchen looked like chaos, backpacks half open, papers scattered, cereal bowls sitting in the sink. I set the paper bag down on the counter and said, quietly, "These are the leftovers from last year. It's all I've got for them today." Belinda gave a little laugh, like she thought I was joking. "Oh, that's fine, Mom. We were going to handle the rest later. The store's open early." That tone, so casual, so dismissive, it set something off in me. I reached into my purse and pulled out the folder. I laid every single receipt down on the counter, one by one, in a neat row. "For years," I said. 4 years of forgetting. Belinda blinked at me. "What are you doing?" "I'm showing you what you've turned into a habit," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Every single year, you've asked or hinted or just waited for me to do it. And every year I did." She rolled her eyes. "Mom, we've been through a lot. You act like we don't appreciate it. Do you?" I asked, because appreciation looks a lot different than what I've seen. Reginald came into the kitchen, then, still buttoning his shirt. "Mom, what's going on?" I turned to him. "I'm done," I said. "This is the last time I play the part of your safety net. You're not kids. You're parents. It's time to act like it." He frowned, rubbing his forehead like I was giving him a headache. "Mom, this isn't the time. The kids are already upset. We just forgot." "You don't forget 4 years in a row, Reginald," I said. "You just stop caring who remembers." He didn't say anything. Belinda crossed her arms and muttered, "We were going to handle it." I looked at her. "No, you weren't. You never do." Silence filled the room, the kind that makes you aware of every tiny sound, the refrigerator humming, the tap dripping. I took a step back, suddenly feeling very tired. "I've spent years trying to help you, but all I've really done is make it easier for you not to grow up." Reginald's face softened a little, like he wanted to argue, but knew I was right. "Mom, it's not that simple," he said. "It is," I replied. "You've turned me into your solution, and I can't do it anymore." Belinda looked away, muttering under her breath, "You don't have to make a scene about it." I laughed quietly. This isn't a scene. It's me stepping out of one. I gathered my folder and turned toward the door. "You'll figure it out this time," I said. As I reached the doorway, Lily came running from the hallway, still in her pajamas, her backpack dragging behind her. "Grandma, are you leaving?" I knelt down and hugged her. "Yes, baby. You're going to have a good day. Just remember, being ready for something starts with caring enough to prepare." She didn't fully understand, but she nodded anyway. I gave her a quick squeeze, stood up, and walked out. When I got back in my car, I didn't start it right away. I just sat there, staring at the house. The curtains were still closed, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about driving away. I'd done my part, and then some. The drive home was quiet. The morning light was just starting to spread across the sky, and traffic was light. I rolled the window down, letting the air hit my face. It felt different this time, lighter somehow. When I pulled into my driveway, I parked and sat for a moment, watching the neighborhood slowly come to life. Across the street, Janice was walking her grandson, Devin, to the bus stop. He waved to me, cheerful as always, his backpack neat and ready. I waved back, smiling faintly. That boy had everything packed, every pencil sharpened. I thought about the difference between his life and my grandkids. Both had hard-working families, but only one seemed to value what he had. Inside the house, I placed the folder on the counter and made another cup of coffee. The kitchen felt peaceful. No clutter, no noise, no guilt. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. As I sat there, the quiet pressed in, but it didn't feel lonely. It felt like a door had finally closed on something I should have ended long ago. Relief and guilt sat side by side in my chest, but the relief was winning. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. And sometimes that's the strongest thing a mother can be. That night, after I left Reginald's house, I couldn't sleep. I kept turning over in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling both lighter and unsettled. I'd finally said what needed to be said, but the silence that followed was louder than I expected. Around midnight, I got up and made some tea. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the old clock above the stove. I pulled the folder of receipts toward me again, opened it, and laid every single one out on the table. I started adding them all up carefully, year by year, season by season. The total stared back at me like a number that didn't belong to my life. $4,000. $4,000 from a pension that barely stretched to cover my mortgage, groceries, and utilities. I sat there a long time, tracing the ink lines of each receipt with my finger. Every dollar had come from somewhere: a canceled doctor's visit, a cheaper grocery trip, a skipped day out with my church group. None of it had been for me. It had all gone to patching up holes Reginald and Belinda dug for themselves. And in doing so, I realized I'd been digging one of my own. The truth hit me hard. I hadn't been helping. I'd been funding their neglect. That thought burned. I wasn't angry anymore, just disappointed in them and in myself. I'd mistaken love for rescue. Maybe that's something mothers do without thinking, but at some point, it stops being love and turns into enabling. I stared at that pile of paper and thought about Devin, the boy next door. Every morning before school, I saw him walking his grandmother's dog, and then catching the bus with his backpack slung low, worn, but tidy. He always waved to me and said, "Good morning, Miss Greenfield." His manners reminded me of a time when kids still said please and thank you. And every time I saw him, I thought about what Janice had said, that he worked hard but might never afford college. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. My own grandchildren were growing up believing that someone would always step in to fix things. Devin was growing up believing that hard work was the only thing that could change his life. By the time the sun came up, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I got dressed, grabbed my purse, and headed to the credit union. I'd banked there for years. They knew me by name. When I walked in, the teller smiled. "Good morning, Mrs. Greenfield. You're early today." "I've got something important to do," I said. She directed me to one of the financial officers, Ms. Yates, a polite woman about my son's age. She led me into her office and asked, "What can I help you with today?" I set my folder of receipts on her desk and said, "I want to open 2 education funds." She smiled. "For both of your grandchildren?" "One for them," I replied, "and one for my neighbor's grandson, Devin Mitchell." Her pen stopped midair. "Oh, so not family?" "No," I said. Not by blood. Anyway, she looked unsure. Are you sure you want to do that, Mrs. Greenfield? We can set up a single family account, and you can decide later how to distribute it. I shook my head. No, I want them separate. She hesitated, then nodded. All right. How would you like to divide the amount? I pulled a slip of paper from my purse where I'd written down two figures. $5,000 for my grandchildren, in my name as trustee, and $5,000 for Devin Mitchell. I want both to collect interest until they turn 18. Ms. Yates blinked, surprised. That's very generous. May I ask why two accounts? I smiled faintly, because one family needs to learn the value of what's given to them, and the other already knows it. She sat back in her chair, thoughtful. That's quite a statement. It's not meant to be dramatic, I said. It's just the truth. My son takes help for granted. Devin's family works themselves to the bone and still struggles, but that boy never complains. I see him study, help his grandmother, and still find time to smile. I'd rather my money reward effort, not excuses. Ms. Yates looked at me with quiet respect. That's admirable, she said, and brave. It's necessary, I replied. We spent the next half hour signing papers. She walked me through the details, the deposit slips, the interest rates, the terms of withdrawal. I listened carefully and made sure everything was written exactly the way I wanted it. When we were done, she handed me two folders, one blue and one green. This one's for your grandchildren, she said, sliding the blue folder across the desk. And this one's for Devin Mitchell. I ran my hand over the green one, the color of new beginnings. You're sure about this? She asked again. I nodded. I am. She smiled softly. You know, Mrs. Greenfield, not everyone would do something like this. Maybe that's the problem, I said. People give to whoever cries the loudest, not to whoever tries the hardest. She didn't have an answer for that, so she just shook my hand and said, Good luck. When I stepped outside, the morning light felt warmer than usual. The air smelled like rain, though the sky was clear. I sat in my car for a minute, holding both folders in my lap. One represented a lifetime of guilt. The other represented hope. I looked out the window at the world going about its business, people heading to work, buses rumbling past, a mother walking her child to daycare. I thought about all the years I'd spent carrying everyone else's burdens. It wasn't wasted time, but it was time spent the wrong way. Now, finally, I was doing something that felt right. Maybe my decision wouldn't be popular. Maybe my son would be furious when he found out. But I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was just done giving where lessons were never learned. As I started the car, I looked down at those folders one last time and said, quietly, this is my new kind of help. Driving home, I passed the school bus stop, where Devin stood, holding his backpack and laughing with another boy. He waved when he saw me. I waved back, smiling. He didn't know it yet, but a small part of his future had just changed. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I felt calm, lighter than I had in years. The guilt, the resentment, the quiet anger, all of it had lifted just enough for me to breathe again. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the two folders resting on the passenger seat. I whispered to myself, I finally did something that feels right, even if it won't be popular. I know half of you will say I was right, and half will say I was heartless. That's fine. Truth should make people talk. Hit like if you think reward should follow effort, and tell me in the comments if family should always come first, no matter what. For a few days, everything was quiet. I didn't hear from Reginald or Belinda, and honestly, I didn't expect to. I went about my usual routine, morning walks, tending to my plants, volunteering a few hours a week at the library. Life felt calm. Then, one Thursday afternoon, my phone started ringing. The caller ID flashed Reginald. I stared at it for a moment, already knowing this wouldn't be a pleasant conversation. I answered, keeping my tone steady. "Hello, son." His voice came out tight, sharp. "So that's it, huh? You're giving away our money to strangers now." I closed my eyes. I take it Belinda saw Janice's post. Damn right she did. He snapped. She put it on Facebook for everyone to see. A picture of that boy holding a thank you card saying you started some scholarship fund for him. You think we wouldn't find out? I took a breath before answering. "Reginald, let's start with one thing. It was never your money." There was a pause on his end, then a low, angry laugh. "You've got to be kidding me. You've been helping us for years, Mom. You've spent more on my kids than anyone else. And now you're just throwing it away on some neighbor kid? What's wrong with you?" "Nothing's wrong with me," I said calmly. "I just decided to spend my money where it might teach the right lesson." He scoffed. "The right lesson? You're punishing your grandkids to make a point." "No," I said, "I'm helping them too. There's a fund in their name. But I also gave to a boy who's earned it, the one next door, who studies every night and helps his grandmother without being asked." He didn't like that answer. I could hear the anger building in his breathing. "So what? You're comparing us to them now? To some family that can't even keep their lights on?" "I'm not comparing anyone," I replied. "I'm saying gratitude and effort matter. I've spent years giving, and you've spent years assuming. That's not my failure, Reginald. It's yours." For a second, all I heard was silence. Then came the explosion. "You've completely lost it. You're so busy judging us that you can't even see what you're doing to your own family. You want to teach us a lesson? Congratulations, you just turned your back on your grandkids." His words stung, but not the way he intended. I stayed quiet for a moment before speaking again. "No, I didn't turn my back on them. I finally stopped turning my back on myself." He let out a long breath that sounded half like a growl. "Do you even hear yourself? You sound like some stranger. You've always been the one person I could count on." "And maybe that's the problem," I said softly. "You shouldn't have been counting on me to fix what you refused to handle." He muttered something under his breath, then said louder, "You just love to make me feel small, don't you?" "That's not what this is about." I said, "You've confused love with control. I loved you by helping, but now I'm loving you by stopping." "Helping another kid over your own blood," he shot back. "You'll never justify that to me." I almost smiled, though my heart hurt. "Maybe not to you," I said, "but I don't need to. I can live with my choices." "Yeah? Let's see if you still feel that way when the kids start asking why their grandma cares more about the neighbor's boy than them." That hit harder than I expected. He knew exactly where to aim. I said quietly, "Maybe they'll learn to see it differently one day. Maybe they'll understand I wasn't rewarding someone else. I was rewarding effort. And maybe they'll start to show some of their own." He sighed sharply. "You're unbelievable." "Maybe," I said, "but I'm done being used." There was another pause, then the sound of him exhaling hard through his nose. "You know what? You do whatever you want, Mom. But don't call me when you realize what you've done." He hung up. The line went dead. And for a long time, I just sat there, the phone still in my hand. The quiet that followed felt heavier than the argument itself. Part of me wanted to cry, but I didn't. I just set the phone down, leaned back in my chair, and let the words replay in my head. "You're punishing the kids. You turned your back on your family. Was I finally holding them accountable for once?" I looked out the window and saw Janice's yard across the street. Devin was helping her rake leaves, laughing about something she said. There was no bitterness in him, no sense of entitlement. Just a kid doing what needed to be done. That sight steadied me. That evening, Belinda posted something online. A vague message, but I knew who it was meant for. Funny how some people preach about family values while donating to everyone but their own. I didn't comment. I didn't even react. Let people think what they wanted. The people who knew me knew I didn't do things for show. The next day, I went out to check my mail. Janice came over, smiling shyly. "I'm so sorry, Martha. I didn't mean to cause any trouble with that post. Devin was just so proud. He wanted to thank you publicly." "It's all right," I said. "You did nothing wrong. I'm glad he's proud. He deserves to be." She looked at me kindly. "You're a good woman. Don't let anyone make you feel bad for doing something good." I smiled. "I don't feel bad. Just a little bruised." That evening, the house felt quiet again. I thought about calling Reginald, but I didn't. Some things needed to settle on their own. I cooked myself a small dinner, washed the dishes, and sat by the window. The streetlights came on one by one, glowing against the dark. Somewhere down the block, I could hear laughter from kids playing before bed. I thought about my grandkids and hoped they were okay, that they'd gone to school with everything they needed from that new fund I'd started. And I thought about Devin, probably finishing his homework by now, unaware of the arguments swirling around my decision. It hurt to know my son was angry with me. It hurt even more to know he didn't understand. But under that pain was something solid, a strange kind of peace. Because for once, I wasn't acting out of guilt or fear. I was acting out of conviction. I looked down at the folders on my coffee table, the blue one for my grandkids, the green one for Devin, and I smiled faintly. It hurt, yes, but it was an honest hurt. The days that followed were quiet, too quiet, if I'm being honest. No calls, no texts, not even a small message from Reginald or Belinda. It was as if someone had pulled a curtain closed between us. At first, the silence felt like a punishment. I'd pick up my phone, half expecting a message that never came. Meals felt longer. The house felt emptier. It's funny how you can live alone for years and not feel lonely until the people you love decide to give you distance. But after a week or so, the quiet started to feel different. Peaceful, not painful. I began to notice things I hadn't in a long time. The way the light hit the kitchen counter in the morning, the sound of birds outside my window, the rhythm of my own breathing without tension behind it. I threw myself into small routines, cleaning out the pantry, pruning the roses, walking every morning before the sun got too hot. There's something about working with your hands that steadies your heart. Janice would wave to me from her porch some mornings. We'd chat a bit about the weather or the neighborhood, nothing heavy. She never mentioned Reginald or Belinda again, and I appreciated that. Then one afternoon, about 3 weeks later, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, there stood Janice and Devin. He was holding something behind his back, smiling from ear to ear. "Hi, Miss Greenfield," he said shyly. "We came to say thank you." I tried to protest. "Oh, sweetheart, you already thanked me plenty. You didn't have to." Before I could finish, he handed me a card. Handmade, folded carefully down the middle. The front had his name written in neat block letters, surrounded by little pencil drawings of books and stars. Inside, in a boy's uneven handwriting, it said, "Thank you for believing in me. I'll make you proud, Miss Greenfield. Love, Devin." I didn't say anything for a second. My throat tightened, and my eyes filled before I could stop them. It wasn't pride that made me cry. It was peace. All those years of pouring myself into people who couldn't see the effort. And here was this boy who noticed every bit of it. I reached out, put a hand on his shoulder, and said, "You already have, sweetheart." Janice smiled, eyes shining. He's been saving for his school books with his lawn money. Said he wanted to make sure he earned the rest. I nodded, speechless. After they left, I sat with that card for a long time. I placed it on the kitchen counter, right beside the blue and green folders. I realized then that what I'd done wasn't about fairness. It was about balance. I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I was just choosing where my help made a difference. A few more weeks went by. Fall was coming, and the air carried that crisp smell that always makes me think of new beginnings. I started baking again, something I hadn't done much of since my husband passed. There's comfort in the smell of bread in the oven. It fills the house, makes it feel like life is happening again. Then one morning, I noticed a new email in my inbox. The sender's name stopped me in my tracks. Belinda. I opened it, expecting another argument, maybe even a lecture. But it wasn't that. It read, "Hi, Mom. I wanted to let you know we're handling the kids' school expenses this year. Reginald picked up some extra hours, and I started a part-time job at the daycare down the road. We're fine. The kids are fine. I know things have been tense. I just wanted to say thank you for everything you've done and for helping us see things more clearly. Belinda." I sat there staring at the screen, not quite sure how to feel. There were no big apologies, no flowery words, but it was something more honest than anything I'd heard from her in years. I didn't reply right away. I read it twice, maybe 3 times. The more I looked at it, the more my shoulders eased. Maybe they finally understood. Maybe that silence I felt wasn't just anger. It was them thinking, reflecting, maybe even feeling the weight of what I'd been carrying for so long. That night, I stepped outside and looked across the street. Janice's porch light was on, and I could see Devin inside, hunched over his books. My grandkids were probably doing the same somewhere across town. Different homes, different lessons, but maybe both learning something new this year. I stood there a while, arms folded, watching the streetlights blink on one by one. I didn't feel angry or smug or even proud, just steady. It's strange how doing something controversial can bring you peace. I knew some people would never understand why I helped another child outside my family. But standing there, I realized it wasn't about who got what. It was about me finally deciding how I wanted to live the rest of my life. No resentment, no guilt, just honesty. A few days later, Reginald called. I didn't answer the first time. But when he called again, I picked up. His voice was calmer. "Mom," he said quietly, "Belinda told you we're figuring things out." "She did," I said. He hesitated. "I guess we just didn't realize how much we were putting on you. I should have known better." "That's a good start," I said. He chuckled softly. "I'm not great at saying sorry." "I noticed," I said, smiling a little. There was a pause. "The kids miss you," he added. "We all do." My heart softened. "I miss them too. Tell them Grandma's always here, but from now on, I expect their parents to lead the way." He agreed. We didn't rehash old arguments. We just talked like two people finally standing on equal ground. After we hung up, I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the table with Devin's card in front of me. The handwriting looked even sweeter now, knowing it came from a boy who appreciated everything he was given. The night felt calm, the kind of calm that only comes when a chapter has truly closed. I looked around my small kitchen, quiet, warm, filled with the faint smell of fresh bread, and I smiled to myself. Maybe, just maybe, they finally felt what I'd been carrying all these years. The seasons rolled by, and before I knew it, another summer had come and gone. The air had that early September smell again, fresh notebooks, cut grass, and a bit of nervous excitement floating around the neighborhood. I could always tell when school was about to start, even without looking at a calendar. But this year felt different. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't dreading the familiar text or phone call that usually came this time of year. I'd spent the past months keeping busy, minding my own peace, and saving a little extra from each pension check. The folder that once held receipts now sat empty in my desk drawer. A small reminder of what I'd finally let go of. That morning, as I poured my coffee, my phone buzzed. I figured it was one of those store reminders about back-to-school sales, but when I looked down, my heart gave a small jolt. It was a message from Reginald. The photo loaded slowly, then appeared clear, Lily and her little brother standing in front of their school, smiling wide. Each had a new backpack, crisp notebooks sticking out, and bright-colored sneakers that actually matched. Below the picture was a simple text. "We got it this year, Mom. Thank you for everything." No emojis. No over-explaining. Just that. I stared at it for a moment, feeling a wave of something soft and steady wash over me. It wasn't pride, exactly, it was relief. The kind that seeps in quietly and settles somewhere deep inside. For years, I'd carried them, thinking that was what love meant. But standing there, looking at that photo, I realized this was what real love looked like. Parents doing what they're supposed to, children smiling without guilt or worry, and a grandmother finally allowed to just be one. I replied, simply, "They look wonderful. I'm proud of all of you. Have a good first day." Then I set the phone down and smiled to myself. It didn't matter if he replied or not. That one photo said everything I'd been waiting to hear. Later that week, Janice stopped by while I was trimming my front hedge. She waved a rolled-up newspaper in the air like it was a winning ticket. "Martha, you're not going to believe this," she said, grinning from ear to ear. I wiped my hands on my apron. "What's all the excitement?" She unrolled the paper and pointed to a small photo near the bottom of the local section. There was Devin, standing next to his school principal, holding a certificate. The headline read, "Local student wins Youth Achievement Award and college grant." My chest swelled. "That boy did it," I said, my voice catching a little. Janice nodded proudly. "He wrote about you in his essay. Said he learned from a neighbor that hard work only means something when you stay grateful." I blinked hard, trying not to get emotional. "That child's going to go far," I said. "He already has," Janice replied. "And I wanted you to see it before the paper sold out." She handed me the clipping, and I promised to keep it safe. After she left, I sat on my porch with that newspaper on my lap, thinking about everything that had changed in just 1 year. My son had stepped up. My grandkids had what they needed because their parents provided it, not because I swooped in. And Devin, well, that boy had proven what I already knew. When someone values what they're given, they multiply it. I thought about how many sleepless nights I'd spent feeling guilty for setting boundaries. How many times I'd wondered if I was being too harsh, too cold, too unmotherly. But in the end, the world didn't fall apart. It got better. Later that afternoon, I went through my mail and set aside my monthly pension check. For the first time in years, I didn't have to earmark any of it for school stuff. I didn't have to plan a trip to Walmart or make lists of crayons and folders. The check sat there, untouched, like a quiet symbol of something I'd regained. Control, dignity, peace. I made myself a simple dinner, just soup and bread, and ate it while the evening news played softly in the background. They were talking about rising costs and families struggling with back-to-school expenses. And I found myself whispering a small prayer for those parents. Not because I pitied them, but because I finally understood how easy it is to fall into the trap of always giving, thinking it'll fix everything. As the sun dipped below the trees, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a picture from Belinda, just the kids sitting at the table, doing their homework. Her caption was short, "They're focused this year. Thank you again for pushing us to do better." That message wasn't flashy, but it meant more than any gift or apology. It meant they were trying. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Maybe people really could change once they stopped being cushioned from consequence. Maybe all it took was one hard boundary and a little silence. Before going to bed, I took Devon's thank you card out of the drawer and placed it next to the newspaper clipping. Together, they told a story no one else needed to understand but me. A story about learning, not teaching. About giving in ways that actually help, not just comfort. Sometimes, doing the right thing doesn't feel good at first. It can hurt, and it can make people angry. But with time, it turns into something solid, something peaceful. That night, as I switched off the light, I felt lighter than I had in years. No guilt, no waiting for the next request, no dread of being needed for the wrong reasons. For the first time in a long time, I kept my pension check intact. Every cent of it. And that, to me, felt like a new beginning. Some people will say I went too far. Maybe I did. But when I look back at everything that happened, I know one thing for sure. I was tired of watching my effort feed carelessness. For years, I thought helping meant love. I thought being a good mother meant stepping in whenever my children stumbled, even when they stopped trying to stand on their own. I believed that if I just kept giving, one day they'd learn from my example. But instead, they learned to lean. It's not easy to admit that. A mother's heart doesn't like boundaries. We're wired to give, to fix, to fill in the gaps. But somewhere along the line, giving turns into enabling. It stops being kindness and becomes convenience for them, not for you. The day I decided to stop, I didn't do it out of anger. I did it because I finally understood that love without limits becomes permission. I'd been giving my son permission to stay the same. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't saying no, it's saying no after years of saying yes. I still remember the first time I didn't buy those school supplies. It felt cruel. I cried that night, wondering if I'd made a mistake. But the truth is, that decision changed everything, for them and for me. They learned to take responsibility. I learned to let go of guilt. When I set up those 2 education funds, one for my grandkids and one for Devon next door, it wasn't about choosing one family over another. It was about balance. For too long, my giving had gone one way. It was time for my generosity to mean something again. I don't regret helping that boy. Not one bit. I regret not teaching my son sooner that love isn't an allowance. When Devon wrote me that thank you card, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Gratitude without expectation. That kind of appreciation makes every sacrifice worth it. And when my son finally took care of his own kids, I realized something else. Sometimes people can't see the value of what you do for them until you stop doing it. That's not bitterness. It's truth. We can't buy respect, but we can teach it, even if it costs us comfort. I think about that lesson often. It's easy to tell yourself, family first, but sometimes putting family first means stepping back so they can learn what responsibility looks like. For me, the hardest part was learning to stop measuring love by what I gave. It took years for me to understand that love isn't proven through sacrifice. It's proven through accountability. There were nights I questioned myself, wondering if my grandkids would think I didn't care. But over time, I saw the difference. They started showing pride in what they had done. Their parents worked harder. The cycle changed. That's what real help should do. It should change things. When I see Devon walking home from school, now, backpack full, head high, I smile. He reminds me that effort deserves recognition. And when I see my grandkids studying at their own kitchen table, I smile again. They remind me that tough love isn't the opposite of love. It's just another form of it. Looking back, I don't regret a single decision. I just wish I'd had the courage to make it sooner. I know not everyone will agree. Some will say, Martha, you should have kept it in the family. Blood is blood. Others will say, you did the right thing. You gave to where it mattered most. And maybe both sides are right in their own way. That's the beauty and burden of choices. You can only make them with the heart you have at the time. But I hope anyone listening to my story remembers this. Giving endlessly doesn't make you good. It makes you tired. Real goodness comes from giving with wisdom, not guilt. If I've learned anything, it's that there's a line between helping and enabling, and it's thinner than you think. You cross it one small favor at a time until one day you wake up realizing you've been carrying the same people who were supposed to walk beside you. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care enough to want people to grow. I think every parent, especially every mother, reaches a moment where love asks for a different kind of strength, the strength to stop rescuing and start teaching. That's where peace begins. Now, when I look at those two folders, the blue one for my grandkids and the green one for Devin, I see balance. I see the result of one hard decision that put everything back in order. Life feels lighter now. My pension check stays in my wallet a little longer, and my sleep comes easier. There's no more resentment, no more waiting for the next favor call. Just quiet satisfaction. Some nights, I sit on my porch watching the sunset, and I think about how simple peace really is when you stop letting guilt run your life. So, to anyone listening, maybe you've been in my shoes. Maybe you've been helping someone who doesn't help themselves. Maybe you've spent years trying to prove your love by giving more than you should. If that sounds familiar, I want you to ask yourself something. Are you helping them grow, or are you helping them stay the same? That's the question that changed my life. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me what you think. Would you have done what I did, or kept it all in the family? Was I cruel, or just finally fair? When does love stop being help and start being a habit? If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Your thoughts matter, because this isn't just my story. It's one a lot of mothers and grandmothers live quietly every day. We give, we forgive, and sometimes we finally stop. If this story made you think, if it reminded you of something you've been through, don't just sit with it. Share it. Someone out there might need to hear it today. Don't forget to download this wonderful book called 38 Uplifting and Funny Short Stories for Seniors. Easy-to-read tales that bring laughter, memories, and mental stimulation. It's full of heartwarming, simple stories written to bring a smile, stir up memories, and remind us that joy doesn't fade with age. It grows stronger. You'll find it in the pinned comment below. Lastly, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs to know they're not alone, and subscribe for more real stories like this one. And remember, helping doesn't always mean saying yes. Sometimes the most loving word in the world is no.